In order, the first order of business is roll call. The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will record their presence. Has every member recorded their presence? The clerk will lock the machine and record the roll. The roll call shows 68 present, 2 absent and excused. A quorum being present, the House is ready for business. The second order of business is prayer by the chaplain, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Today, the prayer will be led by House Pastor Tom Doherty, and the pledge will be led by House Page Esther Frederick. Will the guests in the gallery please rise?
Another Helen Keller quote: "The most pathetic person in the world is someone who has sight but no vision." And of course, Proverbs 29:18 says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, thank you for the minds you have given each of us. All of us have an opportunity to think and make decisions every single day. I pray this day, O Lord, that we would have a vision and great things that can come in our state. Help us never to settle in and take time to think about things that would enhance our lives and lives of the people of Idaho, that we would always take time to think of those things. Dear Lord, you have given us a vast assortment of individuals in this room with a myriad of experience and ideas, and I pray that we could use those as stepping stones towards wonderful things to come. Lord, I thank you so much for this day and for your promise in your word of God to never leave us nor forsake us, but to be with us always, even to the end of the age. I ask this day, dear Lord, that you would bring comfort and peace to Representative Will's family and the loss of his brother. I pray you'd bring real comfort to them. And, oh Lord, be with Representative Moyle and Representative Rebel's wives as they are dealing with being ill. Please touch their lives. And help us to endure, even when things are not perfect, even when the rain clouds of life pour down on us. Help us to stay steadfast. Lord, smile on these people this day. It may be a wonderful day for each of them. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The House will now advance to the third order of business, approval of the Journal. The House is at the third order.
March 13th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, we, your Committee on Judiciary, Rules, and Administration, report that we have read and approved the House Journal of the 65th Legislative Day and recommend same be adopted as corrected. Moved by Wills, seconded by Burgoyne.
You've all heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries and the report is adopted. The House will now advance to the fourth order of business, consideration of messages from the Governor and the Senate. The House is at the fourth order.
From the Office of the Governor, March 12, 2013. Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to advise you that I have signed today and am transmitting to the Secretary of State the following House bills to wit: House Bill 42, 47, 48, 49, 50, 82, 89, 122, 123, 166, 174, and 180. As always, C.L. Butch Otter, Governor of Idaho. March 12, 2013, from the Office of the Governor. Dear Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to advise you that I have signed today and am transmitting to the Secretary of State the following House bills to wit: House Bills 7, 8, 9, 11, 28, 86, 93, 128, 129, 132, and 137. As always, C.L. Butch Otter, Governor of Idaho. From the Senate, March 12, 2013. Mr. Speaker, I return herewith enrolled House Bills 112, 210, 131, 103, 96, 175, 168, 169, and 139, and House Bill 66 as amended in the Senate, which have been signed by the President. Novak, Secretary of the Senate.
House Bills 112, 210, 131, 103, 96, 175, 168, 169, 139, as well as House Bill 66 as amended in the Senate, will be referred to the Judiciary, Rules, and Administration Committee for delivery to the Governor.
March 12, 2013, from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I return herewith enrolled House Concurrent Resolutions 7, 16, 6, 10, and 8. Novak, Secretary of the Senate.
House Concurrent Resolutions 7, 16, 6, 10, and 8 will be referred to the Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee for delivery to the Secretary of State.
From the Senate, March 12, 2013, Mr. Speaker, I transmit herewith Senate Bills 1079, 1059 as amended, 1018 as amended, 1045 as amended, 1105, and 1112, which have passed the Senate. Novak, Secretary of the Senate.
Senate Bills 1079, 1059 as amended, Senate Bill 1018 as amended, Senate Bill 1045 as amended, Senate Bill 1105, and Senate Bill 1112 will all be filed for the first reading.
March 12, 2013, from the Senate, Mr. Speaker, I return herewith House Bills 141, 233, 234, 235, 236, 237, 238, 184, and 187, which have passed the Senate. Novak, Secretary of the Senate.
House Bills 141, 233, 234, 235, 236, 237, 238, 184, and House Bill 187 will all be referred to the Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee for enrolling.
From the Senate, March 12, 2013, Mr. Speaker, I return herewith House Bill 130 as amended in the Senate and House Bill 167 as amended in the Senate, which have passed the Senate. Novak, Secretary of the Senate.
House Bills 130 as amended in the Senate and 167 as amended in the Senate will be held at the desk. The gentleman from District 34.
Mr. Speaker, the amendments to House Bill 130, and that's the bill that we had on the election of directors of water districts, was amended in the Senate to provide for a director whose term expired and was not reelected, that the new director could be elected at the next regular election and then serve for the remainder of that first director's term. The other amendment to Section 2 of the bill is that it just adds this, that the new director will be presented a certificate of election, and if a bond is required, that he will provide a bond for it. These are good amendments, Mr. Speaker, and I would ask unanimous consent that the House do now concur in the Senate amendments to House Bill 130.
You've all heard the unanimous consent request that the House do now concur in the Senate amendments to House Bill 130. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the House does now concur. Good lady from District 35.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We also have an amendment from the Senate on House Bill 167. The amendment is it just replaces the Attorney General with a designee and a dealer advisory board or their designee, which is a good amendment to the bill. And I would move that the House do now concur in the Senate amendments to House Bill 167.
Is the lady asking unanimous consent?
Yes, sir.
You all heard the unanimous consent request that the House do now concur in the Senate amendments to House Bill 167. Is there an objection? Hearing none, so ordered. House Bill 130 as amended in the Senate and House Bill 167 as amended in the Senate will be referred to the Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee for engrossing. The House will now advance to
Mr. Speaker.
Good gentleman from District 28.
Mr. Speaker, for a unanimous consent request.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen. I ask unanimous consent that House Bill 111 be returned to the Agricultural Affairs Committee.
Could the gentleman take just a moment to explain?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen. This is the bill regarding torture to a companion animal with penalties, and it needs further consideration, and it needs to be returned to the Agricultural Affairs Committee. Thank you.
You've all heard the unanimous consent request to return House Bill 111 that resides in general orders back to the Agricultural Affairs Committee. Is there an objection? Hearing none, so ordered. The House will now advance to the fifth order of business, report of standing committees. The House is at the fifth order.
March 13th, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on Judiciary Rules and Administration report that we have printed House Bills 286, 287, 288, 289, 290, 291, 292, and 293. Will's Chairman.
House Bill 286 and 287 will be referred to the Revenue and Taxation Committee. House Bill 288 and 291 will be referred to the Health and Welfare Committee. House Bills 289 will be referred to the Business Committee. House Bill 290 will be referred to the Transportation Committee. House Bill 292 will be referred to the Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee. And House Bill 293 will be filed for second reading.
March 12, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on Transportation and Defense report that we have had under consideration Senate Bill 1064 and recommend that it do pass? Palmer, Chairman.
Senate Bill 1064 will be filed for second reading.
March 12, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on State Affairs report that we have had under consideration House Bill 258 and recommend that it do pass? Lurcher, Chairman.
House Bill 258 will be filed for second reading.
March 13, 2013. Mr. Speaker, will your Committee on State Affairs report that we have had under consideration Senate Bill 1029 and recommend that it do pass? Lurcher, Chairman.
Senate Bill 1029 will be filed for second reading. Without objection, the House will now advance to the eighth order of business, introduction, first reading, and reference of bills and joint resolutions. The House is at the eighth order.
In the House of Representatives, House Bill number 294 by Education Committee, an act relating to proprietary schools, amending Chapter 24, Title 33 Idaho Code by the addition of new Section 33-2410 to establish provisions relating to required disclosures by proprietary schools to students, to establish provisions relating to rescinding a contract, to provide for refunds, and to define terms. House Bill number 295 by Education Committee, an act relating to the Educational Support Program, amending Section 33-1002 Idaho Code to revise provisions relating to the determination of certain district support units and to revise provisions relating to a district's total allowance for the Educational Support Program and declaring an emergency.
House Bills 294 and 295 will be referred to the Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee for printing.
From the Senate, Senate Bill number 1079 by State Affairs Committee, an act relating to Internet crimes against children, amending Section 67-1401 Idaho Code to provide additional duties of the Attorney General and to make technical corrections, amending Chapter 14, Title 67 by the addition of new Sections 67-1410 and 1411 to create the Internet Crimes Against Children Fund in the State Treasury. Senate Bill number 1059 as amended by Judiciary and Rules Committee, an act relating to the control of venereal diseases, amending Section 39604 Idaho Code to revise provisions relating to the examination for and treatment of certain diseases of persons confined or imprisoned in any state prison facility in Idaho. Senate Bill number 1018 as amended by Judiciary and Rules Committee, an act relating to jury selection and service, amending Section 208 Idaho Code to provide a correct code reference and to revise provisions relating to contempt proceedings for a prospective juror who fails to appear pursuant to a court order, and amending Section 7610 Idaho Code to provide a certain penalty. Senate Bill number 1045 as amended by Transportation Committee, an act relating to veterans, amending Section 65502 Idaho Code to revise the definition of veteran and to provide a definition of active duty. Senate Bill number 1105 by State Affairs Committee, an act relating to the Legislative Department, repealing Section 67-2027 Idaho Code relating to the State Board of Examiners, providing for an audit, and amending Chapter 4, Title 67 by the addition of a new Section 67-429D to provide that the Legislative Council shall engage the services of a certified public accountant to audit the fiscal affairs of the Legislative Department. Senate Bill number 1112 by State Affairs Committee, an act relating to the proceedings before the Public Utilities Commission, amending Section 61-622 Idaho Code to revise the Public Utilities Commission's authority regarding schedule, rate, fare, toll, rental, charge classification, contract, practice, rule, service, or regulation, to revise procedures and to make a technical correction, and repealing Section 61-623 relating to the determination of schedule and regular rates by the Public Utilities Commission.
Senate Bill 1079, 1059 is amended, 1018 as amended will be referred to the Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee. Senate Bill 1045 as amended will be referred to the Commerce and Human Resource Committee. Senate Bill 1105 will be referred to the State Affairs Committee, and Senate Bill 1112 will be referred to the Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee. Without objection, the House will now advance to the 10th order of business, second reading of bills and joint resolutions. The House is at the 10th order.
In the House of Representatives, House Concurrent Resolution 25 by State Affairs Committee regarding Hawaii County. House Bill 280 by State Affairs Committee regarding firearms, explosives, other deadly weapons. House Bill 283 by Appropriations Committee regarding appropriations, Department of Health and Welfare, Child Welfare, Developmentally Disabled Services. House Bill 284 by Appropriations Committee regarding appropriations, Office of Drug Policy. House Bill 285 by Appropriations Committee regarding appropriations, Commission on Aging. House Bill 250 by Revenue and Taxation Committee regarding sales tax exemptions. House Bill 239 by Health and Welfare Committee regarding pharmacists. Senate Bill 1063 by Health and Welfare Committee regarding Medical Consent and Natural Death Act. Senate Bill 1100 by Health and Welfare Committee regarding Healthcare Sharing Ministries Freedom to Share Act. House Bill 256 by State Affairs Committee regarding Child Protective Act. Senate Bill 1033 as amended by Judiciary and Rules Committee regarding conservators' powers of attorney. Senate Bill 1061 by Resources and Environment Committee regarding threatened and endangered species. Senate Bill 1062 as amended by Resources and Environment Committee regarding trespass. House Concurrent Resolution 19 by Health and Welfare Committee regarding nutritional services. House Bill 215 by State Affairs Committee regarding ballots. House Concurrent Resolution 18 by State Affairs Committee regarding Department of Administration Contract Management. Senate Bill 1142 by Finance Committee regarding appropriations, Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. House Bill 177 as amended in the Senate regarding State Affairs Committee.
House Concurrent Resolution 25, House Bills 280, 283, 284, 285, 250, and 239, as well as Senate Bill 1063, Senate Bill 1100, House Bill 256, Senate Bill 1033 is amended, Senate Bill 1061, Senate Bill 1062 is amended, House Concurrent Resolution 19, House Bill 215, House Concurrent Resolution 18, Senate Bill 1142, and House Bill 177 as amended in the Senate will all be filed for the third reading. The House will now advance to the 11th order of business, third reading of bills and joint resolutions. The House is at the 11th order. The House will have under consideration House Bill 248. Good gentleman from District 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ask unanimous consent to dispense with further reading of House Bill 248.
You've all heard the unanimous consent request. Is there an objection? Hearing none, the good gentleman from District 27 is recognized to open the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Rule 38, I wish to disclose that my employer and or its subsidiaries may or may not be affected by this legislation. I do intend to vote.
Duly noted. Please proceed.
Good ladies and gentlemen, prior to going through the House bill, I'd like to take a moment to put this bill into perspective and why we're here today. With the passage of the Affordable Care Act, Idaho has a simple choice to make. And that choice is, what kind of a state insurance exchange do we want in terms of health insurance? We have to have an exchange with the passage of the Affordable Care Act. We don't have a choice not to have an exchange. We must have an exchange. And there's only two types. There's a state exchange, or there's two versions of a federally facilitated exchange. Secondly, that this exchange is going to be a marketplace. It's not going to be the marketplace, and it's not going to be the only marketplace. It's just going to be a portion of the marketplace. There will certainly be a marketplace outside of the exchange. And thirdly, come January the 1st of 2014, there will be significant changes to most health insurance products sold both inside the exchange and outside the exchange. I'll briefly now run through House Bill 248 and then try to quantify the differences between what I see as a state-based exchange and a federally facilitated exchange. In House Bill 248, Section 416102 is the purpose and intent. And I think that it's important enough, and this is an apt enough description of what this is about today, that I'm going to read it into the record. Purpose and intent. It is the public policy of the state of Idaho to actively resist federal actions that would limit or override state sovereignty under the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Through this legislation, the state of Idaho asserts its sovereignty by refusing to surrender decision-making authority over health care issues, which are matters appropriately left to the states and individual citizens. The purpose of this chapter is to establish a state-created, market-driven health insurance exchange that will facilitate the selection and purchase of individual and employer health benefit plans. The creation of a state-based health insurance exchange will provide an Idaho-specific solution that fits the unique needs of the state of Idaho. Participation in the exchange is voluntary, in that no person or employer shall be required by this chapter to purchase a health benefit plan through the exchange. Creation of the exchange and its operation is deemed a public purpose intended to enhance Idaho residents' choice regarding options and access to health insurance. Section 6103 is a definitions section, and I won't go through the few definitions that are there. 6104 establishes the exchange as an independent body, corporate and politic. It creates a board of 19 members. 17 members are voting members. It provides for open meetings of the board. It provides for annual audits of the board by a third party. It provides for procurement policy and development and implementation of that policy. And it provides for Idaho rating areas. Section 6105, powers and authority of the board. It authorizes implementation and operations of an exchange. It provides for the adoption of bylaws. It provides for the assessment and collection of fees. It provides for the ability to appoint advisory committees to advise the exchange board. It provides for the board to take legal action, particularly to collect those fees that are owed to it. It provides the ability of the board to contract for operational functions and accept RFPs for those contracts. And it provides for the ability to develop and implement a plan of operation. Some of the limitations that it places on the board cannot change its legal structure. It must be financially self-sufficient. It cannot ask for or take state funds. It cannot tax or encumber state assets. It provides for a voluntary marketplace. It provides that there is no requirement to purchase from this portion of the marketplace. There is no requirement to participate. Conversely, it prevents the ability of the board to prevent participation by individuals, employers, carriers, etc. It provides for an independent annual third-party audit. It provides that the exchange cannot inquire or collect data about guns, the use of guns, ammunition, storage, etc. And it provides that the board must certify to the governor and the director, meaning the director of the Department of Insurance, that personal information is secure before it can proceed. Section 6106 is the reporting requirements. Section 6107 provides that the Exchange Board does not supersede the duties of the Director of the Department of Insurance. 6108 provides that wherever practical and within law, the board should consider the use of Idaho personnel and Idaho contractors, and Section 6109 provides for severability. In general, House Bill 248 provides legislative oversight in the following manner. The governor appoints the board, and the Senate confirms that appointment process. There are 3 legislators that sit on the governing board, and they are voting members. There is an annual report that is provided to the legislature of the activities of the board, and the board shall report to the germane committees during each session about any bylaws changes, about changes in the federal law or regulations, and about any fee changes. That is what House Bill 248 provides. Now, let's take a moment and visit, if we will, what the real difference is between a state-based exchange versus a federally facilitated exchange. Because, let's face it, both exchanges are required to carry out the essential functions of an exchange under the Affordable Care Act. So it's not so much what the exchange has to do that's the difference. The real difference is how the exchange is able to provide those functions, etc. Let's first visit cost. Cost, ladies and gentlemen, there's 2 components of the cost. There's a cost of construction in the first year of operation. Both under the federally facilitated exchange and the state-based exchange will be paid for 100% by the federal government. In a state-based exchange, they will be funded by grants. Of course, in a federally facilitated exchange, they'll be just paid directly by the federal government. However, the difference comes in the ongoing operations. Both exchanges must be self-sustaining and self-supporting. There's a lot we don't know about what the ongoing costs are going to be. There is a single thing that we do know about what the cost is going to be ongoing, and that is what the federal government is going to charge anyone who uses the exchange if it's a federally facilitated exchange. Now, the federal government can't tell us what the cost of running their exchange is at all. But they certainly can tell us, and they already have told us, what they're going to charge people to be on that exchange. At least the state of Idaho is willing to say we don't really know for sure. We have fairly good estimates based upon other states that have been at this for a year to 18 months of what we think the cost is going to be to build the exchange. We don't know what the insurers are or what price the insurers are going to put on their products to purchase them through the exchange. We don't know how many people are going to use the exchange, all of which goes into determining how much it's going to cost to run the exchange. The federal government doesn't know that either. But what have they done? They have told us how much they're going to charge us for anybody who uses the exchange. Now, in a little bit, I'm going to talk about what we need to do today, and how we decide what we do today is going to be based upon previous actions for the past 120 years of the federal government versus Idaho. Well, this right here is one example of why, in my opinion, we really ought to go for the option of a state-based exchange. They know what they're going to charge us. They can't have any idea of what the cost is going to be. Next, let's look at the difference in governance. We know that in a state-based exchange, that the exchange is going to have 19 members, all from the state of Idaho. All of them, they're going to be somewhere around here so that maybe not literally, but figuratively, we can walk across the street and talk to the governing board of the exchange. I talked to a gentleman by the name of Mr. Paul DioGuardia at HHS 3 or 4 times on the phone, specifically got permission to reference his name with respect to the debate today. And I asked him this question. Mr. DioGuardia, we know what the governing board and the governance structure is going to be in a state-based exchange. Can you tell me what the governing structure is going to be in a federally facilitated exchange? Who are the people going to be? Where are they going to be? Where is it going to be housed, et cetera? He said, I can't tell you any of that. We don't know. We haven't made that decision yet. Obviously, it will be based somewhere at HHS, most likely in Washington, D.C. Some of those functions may come out of Region 10 in Seattle. But there's not going to be a person that's identified. There's not going to be a phone number identified. There may be a regional manager somewhere of a few states that we may be able to contact, et cetera. But if you compare that to the governing structure that's set forth in House Bill 248, I think it's pretty clear the answer that I would have to that choice. Next, let's talk about transparency. The governing board in a state-based exchange is subject to the open meeting law. Their meetings will be televised, audio streamed, et cetera. That's certainly not going to be the case out of HHS, and that's not going to be the case out of Seattle or wherever else the governing structure of a federally facilitated exchange exists. Let's talk about jobs. There's a provision in House Bill 248 to wherever practical and within law to use Idaho employers and Idaho employees. Do you think the federal government's going to do that? No. And you and I both know it. Open market versus an active purchaser model. I would agree that the federal government has said, at least for the first year of operation, that in a federally facilitated exchange, they're going to allow any carrier that has qualified products to be on the exchange. They also go on to say that they will evaluate that after the first year and that they will determine how the process needs to be streamlined and become more efficient. Well, I'll tell you how you make it more streamlined and more efficient. You take the number of carriers that want to be on the exchange from 13 down to 2, which is what the Affordable Care Act calls for, and that's how you become more streamlined and more efficient. The House Bill 248 has provisions that it must be an open market. All of the carriers will always be able to participate in a state-based exchange if they so choose. Idaho, the law forbids Idaho from going to an active purchaser model, which is the model that I previously described. Let's take, for instance, a call center. There's a provision that a call center is required. Where do you think the federal government's call center is going to be? And I'm not going to say anything else about that, but I think we all know that the entire globe would be eligible for a call center. I think there's plenty of call centers in Idaho that if there was a state-based exchange, Idaho could find a call center in Idaho that could meet those needs. Let's talk about oversight as the third category of what I think is a significant difference between a state-based exchange and a federally facilitated exchange. The navigator issue is an issue that is provided for in the Affordable Care Act. But what does the navigator issue and navigators do to the thousands of jobs that our brokers and our agents perform in the state of Idaho that have independent offices around the state, that have employees, et cetera? All you would have to do is to significantly say, we want the navigator function to predominate, and we want to minimize the use of brokers and agents on the exchange, and that would significantly impact the state of Idaho and the jobs in the state of Idaho. And the federal government would certainly be within its rights to do that. They will be choosing the navigators. And that ought to scare just about everybody in this room as to what they're going to, or who they're going to use as navigators. A board of Idahoans on a governing board would certainly be able to determine and protect the agents and issuers, the agents and brokers, to the point to where we'd try and keep as many jobs in Idaho as we could. There would be legislators on the board. There will be 3 voting members of the legislature on the board, one selected by the pro tem, one selected by the Speaker of the House, and one selected by minority leadership. Those 3 members of the legislature would certainly have Idaho's best interest at heart. The reporting requirements to the legislature. I think that these reporting requirements would keep the legislature abreast of what the exchange is doing, and would certainly be, we have never been bashful about this legislature telling anyone what we think of their operations, and I don't expect that we would be bashful in doing that either. And last, the open meeting law. There's not going to be any open meetings in a federally facilitated exchange. I can't believe that they would even have the concept of an open meeting in a federally facilitated exchange. So I think those are the main differences, Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House. And in closing, I would like to comment this way. The issue before us is a very simple question. Do we want a state-based exchange where Idaho is in control as much as possible under the Affordable Care Act as we can be, or do we just want to default to the federal government? This is a big picture question. This is not a small picture question. The answer to this question is not found in the 3,000 pages of federal code, nor is it found in the thousands of pages of federal regulations that accompany the Affordable Care Act. The answer to what we do today lies in the answers to the following questions. 1, why, after defaulting in the wolf management program to the federal government, after a few years, Idaho fought so hard and for so long to get wolves back under the management of the state of Idaho and the State Fish and Game Department? Question number 2, why, when the Bush administration gave the states the option to have their own roadless rule after the Clinton roadless rule, Idaho immediately set about developing its own roadless rule? Question number 3, why, when the current administration decided they would give the western states the ability to come up with their own sage-grouse plan, why did members of this legislature and others immediately feverishly set about developing our own sage-grouse plan? Question number 4, water. Why do all Idahoans want the state of Idaho to manage our water? Why don't we just default to the federal government? I think that answer is abundantly clear. Question number 5, why do most people involved in agriculture much rather deal with the Idaho Department of Agriculture rather than the United States Department of Agriculture, if you can find one? Question 6, why would most residents of the state of Idaho prefer to deal with the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality as opposed to the Environmental Protection Agency out of Region 10 in Seattle? And the last question, Mr. Speaker, is why has this House recently passed resolutions and I presume the Senate will do the same, and people and members of this body and others are making a plan to try to get our federal lands back under Idaho management that are currently under the Forest Service and the BLM management. The answer lies in the answers to those questions. This is a big picture issue. It is not a small picture issue. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I will stand for any questions regarding House Bill 248 and try to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Good lady from District 33.
I'm sorry. Would the gentleman please yield to a question?
Will the gentleman from District 27 yield to a question? And
Gentleman
would the good
yields.
lady from District 33 use the microphone?
Gentleman yields.
Yep.
The gentleman yields.
Thank you. You brought up the topic of brokers being, as being able to have a free market as far as brokers. The question I have is that in our blueprint that we submitted in Section 2.8 to HHS, we specifically state that we want to encourage those brokers to use the exchanges, and in doing so, it says, in order to avoid agents and brokers driving business away from the plans offered in the exchange, the Idaho Exchange may consider providing Idaho agents and brokers with the same compensation. So my question is if we want an open market, and you say we have such an open market, why would we as a state then offer our brokers the same compensation to bring people onto that exchange?
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady from 33. I think I understand what you're trying to drive at. I think the issue there was to make sure that agents and brokers would not be excluded from the exchange. Okay? That they would be allowed to use the exchange as they saw fit, or they would be allowed to not use the exchange as they saw fit. But I think the state plan, the issue in writing the state plan was to make sure that the navigator issue and the agents and brokers issue would be allowed to be used by the state as it saw fit, not trying to force them either into the exchange or force them out of the exchange, is the way that I read that.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 13.
Would the gentleman from 27 stand for a couple
Gentleman
of
yields.
questions?
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentleman from District 27. You had stated in your opening that comparing the state exchange to departments that we have like DEQ and Department of Agriculture, are those two departments independent body, corporate and politic, or are they agencies of the state?
Gentleman from 27.
Good gentleman from 13. Obviously, they're departments of state government.
So would the difference, Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield further?
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman from District 27. So would you say that there is a difference between this state-based exchange, which is an independent body, corporate and politic, versus state agencies, and do you think that's a fair
Gentleman
comparison?
from 27.
Well, I think you're missing the point of what I'm trying to talk about, good gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen of the body, what I'm driving at here is we have, in my opinion, an act that we have lived under for the past 30-some-odd years that's even more onerous than the Affordable Care Act. And that is the Endangered Species Act. Now, what has Idaho done every single time, with the exception of wolves, where we learned our lesson, of course, and since we learned our lesson, we've not gone down that road. But what is the lesson that we've learned? The lesson we've learned is yes, we have this very onerous federal act out here that we have to live under. But rather than defaulting to that act or the provisions of that act, then every single time that the federal government gives us an opportunity to do something on our own, we're going to do it on our own. We're not going to have some federal agency do it. And by doing it on our own, we can actually push back as hard as we can push back, to the point of forcing them to sue us if necessary. And that was the point that I was trying to make. We have an act probably about as onerous as the Endangered Species Act, called the Affordable Care Act. And the point being is what should we do about that? Well, in response to the Endangered Species Act and other things, we created the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality rather than just defaulting to the Environmental Protection Agency. That was my point. Good gentleman from 13.
Is there further debate?
Further question, Mr. Speaker?
Will the gentleman yield further?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentlemen. I do understand your point. Maybe I'll try this in a different way. Maybe I think we're talking past each other here. Is the oversight that we have of DEQ and Department of Ag by setting of budgets and adopting rules the same oversight that we will have over this independent corporate body non-politic or corporate body politic?
Gentleman from 27.
I think it's a different kind of an oversight, but I think we can still have the same kind of oversight. I don't have a problem with that issue because there are multitudes of independent bodies, corporate and politic, in the state of Idaho, like the Health Facilities Authority, the Idaho Bond Bank, the Idaho High Risk Pool, the State Insurance Fund, et cetera, some of which have legislators on them, some of which don't. But that has never been a problem in the state of Idaho. The past history of all of those numerous bodies indicate that they are functioning just fine with the amount of oversight that is provided to those agencies. As a matter of fact, House Bill 248, I believe, probably provides as much oversight as you can probably provide to that kind of a body and still be an independent body, corporate and politic.
Is there further debate?
Follow up, Mr. Speaker.
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
The gentleman yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentlemen. I did not sit in on the hearings, and you have done a lot of research on this. I understand we have a federal exchange. We have this independent body corporate politic exchange. Is there another exchange option out there that would have provided more oversight?
Gentleman from 27.
Good gentleman from 13, you could have put it within the Department of Insurance.
Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and would the good gentleman stand for a question?
Will the gentleman yield to another question?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentleman from 27. You stated earlier in your presentation that the federal government was going to provide ongoing funding for the first year and that it had to stand alone on its own. Does the federal government then decide what the rate or the premium surcharge is going to be on all those policies, or does the state set that and then the federal government make up the difference? Or how is that determined? Because we've had arguments stating that the federal would be a higher surcharge or higher premium than the state would charge.
Gentleman from 27.
Good gentleman from 22. I think you're talking about a couple of different things here from my perspective. First of all, the construction cost and first year of operations can be funded through grants in a state-based exchange. If it's a federally facilitated exchange, the government just writes the check to the contractor. After that, it has to be self-sustaining in both models. Now, the government, in a federally facilitated exchange, the federal government has said, we already know what we're going to charge. It's 3.5% premium tax. Now, we don't know what that means because the insurance companies that have or have not put their product on the exchange, they have not determined what the cost of those policies are going to be. And obviously, if you don't know what the cost of the policy is going to be, you can't compute 3.5% premium tax. Secondly, you don't know how many people are using the exchange, and until you know how many people are going to use the exchange, you can't really calculate whether you're going to do it on a percent basis or whether you're going to do it on a per member per month basis, which is probably the easiest way to calculate it, what that fee is going to be. So that is why for the first year of operation, the federal government is going to allow the grant funding on a state exchange to do that. But after the first year, then an awful lot of these questions will be answerable to you. But the a state exchange, as well as the federal exchange, simply is going to have to be self-supporting and self-sufficient.
Is there further debate?
Follow-up, Mr. Speaker.
Will the gentleman yield further?
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good gentleman from 27. Is it possible that the federal government will look at the exchange in our first year of operations and decide that our charges are not near sufficient to cover the operation, and we'll come back to our state exchange and say you need to have a surcharge of 3.5%, and that we will then support the balance with grants?
Gentleman from 27.
I don't believe that to be the case at all, good gentlemen. I think that if they certify a state-based exchange, I believe that's up to the state and the legislature, et cetera, to make sure that that state exchange is functioning appropriately with respect to the oversight, and we get that through the reporting requirements. Again, ladies and gentlemen of the body and good gentlemen from 22, let's look at the history of 40 years of independent bodies, corporate and politic, that the state of Idaho has a history with. None of these bodies, that I can find, have ever gotten into trouble for mismanagement or anything else. And there's some pretty significant bodies out there operating. Idaho Housing and Finance Association, the Idaho Bond Bank, the High Risk Pool, the State Insurance Fund, and on and on. There is a list of, I think, 60 some odd entities that are independent public bodies, corporate and politic, that do this, and every single one of them have functioned appropriately. So I don't think that this is an issue, good gentlemen. I understand your concern. I think it's a very valid concern, and we certainly ought to debate that point here. I'm not saying that at all. I think you're going down the right path. But I really have a great deal of comfort with this. This is when the governor Mr. Speaker, the gentleman on the second floor, first thought about this 2 years ago and asked me to serve on his initial working group to try to come up with a plan. I proposed at the very first meeting that we should have an independent body, corporate and politic, simply because of the past history of how reliable they have been in the state of Idaho.
Thank you, good gentleman.
Is there further debate? Good lady from District 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman yield to a question or two or three?
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Gentlemen, you have alluded to the wolf situation. And I think I'm understanding you to say that we botched that so badly we don't want to botch the exchange in the same way. And we did botch it. I guess my question to you is, just because we botched one thing doesn't necessarily mean we're going to botch another. And what do wolves have to do with this healthcare exchange anyway?
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady from 8, I believe.
Correct.
What I meant by that, and I won't use the term botched. I wasn't here, and so any of my actions that go wrong, I'll use the word botched on, but I won't say that anybody else that was here at that time that made that decision. But here's what I'm alluding to, good lady, is that Idaho has an opportunity here under what I consider a very onerous act like the Endangered Species Act, which I think you and I can probably, I think you agree that the Endangered Species Act is pretty onerous from time to time. But we were given we weren't asked whether we wanted wolves. We were told we were going to have wolves. But we were also given the option of managing wolves under the following parameters: that below I-90, they would be an experimental 10J population, and that if we managed the wolves would be limited to 10 breeding pair. Well, that's not too bad. If you add that up, they'll only eat a few hundred elk a year instead of the thousands that they're eating on an annual basis now. But my point is, good lady, is that at that time we were given an option to manage something on our own. And we declined that option. We declined the option to manage wolves on our own. And we are now given an option of we're forced to have an exchange. I didn't say I agreed with that. I said we're just forced to have an exchange, that's it. And there's no difference between forced to have an exchange and forced to have wolves. But the fact is that we have a choice of whether to run our own exchange or have somebody else to run that exchange. And I submit to you that in my opinion, and if the good lady wants to use the word botch, let's use it. We'll botch this if we don't have a state-based exchange, in my opinion. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Mr. Speaker?
Good lady.
Well,
gentleman yields, good lady.
I am going to ask you to yield.
Direct all of your inquiries through the speaker, please.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
The gentleman yields.
I guess we've settled that. But at any rate,
glad that
gentlemen,
we
I
did.
guess the question, because I was here subsequent to when the wolves were forced on us. And I don't, if there's any comparison between wolves and health care, I think it's a forced thing. And we actually have a statute. This might be something you would be interested in knowing. Not a statute, a House Joint Memorial that was passed soon after all of this foo-fra that says the state of Idaho wants the wolves immediately delisted and removed by whatever means necessary. We never followed through. What makes you think we'll follow through on the health care thing if we take it? And incidentally, we didn't have that big a choice. The management began with the tribes, and then we got to dithering around about it. And when we did get a kind of management...
Good lady, let's pose the question and let the gentleman answer it.
Well, sometimes it's hard to ask a question when you don't have some history.
No.
But anyway, we didn't manage except as we were told we could manage. And that's exactly what I've pretty much heard you say about the health care exchange. We will be told, or no, you're going the other way, that we won't be told, but I submit that we will. I guess we agree to disagree. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate? Good lady from District 35.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield to a question?
The gentleman yield. The
Gentleman yields.
This question, gentlemen, is in the bill itself, a question that I don't know the answer to, and that's on page 2 of the bill. I would like to know what line 14, producer, means. And it does give a code section. I don't know that, and I've wondered, reading that several times, what does a producer mean in this bill?
As I understand it, good lady, producer means is insurance language for agents and brokers. Agents and brokers. That's insurance language for agents and brokers as a producer.
Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Would the gentleman yield further?
The gentleman yield.
Gentleman yields.
The gentleman yields.
You also stated in your opening that you had a pretty good idea what, by looking at other states, what the cost to implement the exchange might be. And could you give us that figure that you think? I think you said you had pretty good information.
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good question, lady. This is the way that the Department of Insurance kind of calculates what they think that the cost of operating an exchange might be. And it's based upon the figure of 177,000 employers and employees and individuals seeking products through the exchange. It is based upon, I forget the exact dollar figure that they're putting on an average per policy per year. But in their calculation, a 3.5% premium tax on a federally facilitated exchange would generate $28 million, and that they think that it's going to cost the state of Idaho roughly $10 million to operate an exchange, which would equate to somewhere around $6.80 to $7 per member per month, which would equate to a little bit less than half of what the federal government is going to charge. Mind you, the federal government is going to charge us $28 million. They can't tell us what it's going to cost to operate the exchange, which in my opinion is one of the major arguments to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to go down the road of a federal exchange, period, that alone. If you can't tell me, if you're going to charge me $28 million and you can't tell me what it's going to cost to run it, but you can tell me what you're going to charge me, I don't think anybody would go down that road very long. But excellent question. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, one more question, if I might ask the gentleman.
Would the gentleman yield further?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, gentlemen. One of the other statements in here is that all providers can be in the market, and it does have a caveat, and that says if they are eligible. And I read that several places in the bill, and I'm wondering who makes the decision on if they are eligible to be part of the market.
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady. Eligible, if I remember correctly, a carrier would have to be able to have its plans certified by whoever the exchange contracts with, most likely the Department of Insurance, that their health plan is a federally qualified health plan. Then it can be listed on the exchange, and then any carrier, any insurance carrier that provides a qualified plan would be allowed to be listed on the exchange.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from District 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the good gentleman stand for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. The statistics for the 2010 show that presently Idaho insurance companies are using 42 cents of every dollar for overhead, and 58 cents is being paid to healthcare providers. Does the bill contemplate similar costs for the exchange?
Gentleman from 27.
Good gentleman, I think you're going to, I might be missing the point here. I guess I don't quite understand the question, because I think you're saying that the insurance carriers are using certain percents of premium for their own operation, but I'm not sure how that equates to the exchange. I'm sorry, good gentleman. I apologize.
Would the gentleman from District 2 care to clarify his inquiry?
Mr. Speaker, I will try. The question of overhead has been discussed, good gentleman, and can we use the statistics from the similar industry, the insurance healthcare industry, can we use those same figures for and project them on the exchange in terms of costs of operation?
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. I don't believe those equate. The exchange is not going to, I don't believe the exchange is just going to raise enough revenue to perform the functions of the exchange, and that is not going to be a function of the exchange as I read this. Now, I'm not I'm not an expert in this, and perhaps I would yield to the good gentleman from District 6 if he would care to take a crack at that. But I don't think I don't think you're comparing apples to apples, good gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from 2, would you like to redirect your question to the gentleman from 6?
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like another question.
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, good gentleman. You did mention pushback, the ability to push back against federal mandates, and I'm wondering whether in your reading of the text, it contemplates whether or not any federal rules or regulations that the board from the, I'm assuming Health and Human Services or otherwise, are there any of those rules and regulations that the board would not have to follow?
Gentleman from 27.
I believe the board would have to follow the federal law and the regulations associated with federal law, but some of the rules obviously would give discretion to the board in certain areas to a certain amount of latitude, and I think that's what I referred. I didn't refer to the board would not be able to, or would I suggest that the board not follow federal law or federal regulations?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 21.
Thank you, good Speaker. Will the gentleman from 27 yield to a
Will
question?
the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, good gentleman and Speaker. Does this bill allow the legislature to approve or reject fee increases or fee changes?
Gentleman from 27.
Mr. Speaker, good gentleman, no.
Thank you.
Is there further debate? Good lady from District 5.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield to a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
My constituents have been asking this question of me, and I sat down last night and counted up how many people I've heard from, and by the way, it's a 6-to-1 margin against this bill, and most of it centers around the fact that most of them were given the impression under the Affordable Care Act that states could opt out of providing abortions. Yet a few short weeks ago, we have seen an opinion from the Attorney General's office that states that the bill that we passed only restricts mechanical abortion. We now understand that Idaho will be providing drugs such as Ella and Plan B, and I wondered if you could explain to this body how these drugs work and why we shouldn't consider that they are abortions.
Good gentleman from District 27. Will the good lady from District 5 remain standing during the question and answer period? Thank you.
Thank you, good lady. I have one Attorney General's opinion with respect to the subject of abortion, and I don't remember it saying that. I do remember the Attorney General's opinion saying that he did not feel that there was any loophole in Idaho's law with respect to abortion at all. We have closed that. The Affordable Care Act says that the states can opt to make sure that there is no abortion coverage provisions either in a federal exchange or a state exchange. And Idaho last year passed 41-1848, which prevents abortion from being offered through either a federal or a state exchange. Now, the issue is whether or not, particularly Ella, is being, the FDA only approves it as a contraceptive. The question I think arises is, are physicians or anyone else, either outside the United States or inside the United States, prescribing it as an abortifacient as opposed to sticking to the FDA mandate that it only be used for contraception? And of course, illegal use of anything, this act doesn't govern. The Idaho statute may, and the Attorney General may enforce that. But with respect to abortion and with respect to the state of Idaho has covered that in 41-1848.
Thank you.
Is there further debate? Good lady from District 11.
Mr. Speaker, this is not to debate, but I actually do have an answer for the question that was asked by the good gentleman from...
It will be counted as debate, good lady.
Then I might save that in my debate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Good gentleman from District 23.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to a point of personal privilege.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have in the balcony today the Elmore County Central Committee has just arrived, and we also have the chairman of the state party who's up there, and I'd like to welcome them.
Welcome to the House Gallery. Is there further debate? Good gentleman from District 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege and for a motion.
State your privilege. The gentleman has the floor on the privilege.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If there's one thing that has remained constant, ladies and gentlemen, throughout the history of Idaho, it's our great respect for the freedom of conscience and the desire, therefore, to protect life. The one concern overlooked in our rush to acquiesce to the so-called blandishments of the federal government is the important protection of women and the preborn. I therefore move, Mr. Speaker, to amend HB 184 to assure that Idaho remains steadfast in protecting our citizens' religious freedom, freedom of conscience, and respect for life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker?
Oh, I'm sorry. 248.
I second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded.
248.
I'll interpret what the good gentleman has said to move House Bill 248 to general orders. Is there debate on that motion? Good gentleman from District 27.
Mr. Speaker, to debate against the motion.
Would the maker of the motion care to debate, to open the debate? Now, I will caution the body. This is a motion to move the bill to the general orders. And so if we get too far afield in what amendments may or may not be added when we're in the 12th order, then that will push up against the line, I believe, on the motion of moving it to general orders. But as has been the custom here, when we ask unanimous consent, etc., it's our custom to explain and to briefly explain. We allow that when we ask unanimous consent to concur in Senate amendments. We allow when we move a bill with unanimous consent from the calendar back to committee or whatnot. And so we do allow some latitude in the explanation of those unanimous consent requests, and a motion is an outgrowth of that. And so to a certain degree, some debate on the amendment might, will be in order, but if it becomes debate on the specifics of the amendment, then I think that we've pushed against the line over which I don't want to cross. The gentleman is recognized to debate the motion to move House Bill 248 to general orders.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. As I understand the rules, Mr. Speaker, a bill is open to amendment in the third reading. Therefore, I do not propose a specific amendment, although I am having the pages distribute the text of a proposed amendment that would facilitate the issues I have described here in my personal privilege with respect to protecting women, the preborn, freedom of conscience, and freedom of religion. These issues are not addressed in the present bill, although I understand that they were discussed. I was not a party to those discussions. With respect to these particular issues, it's important to the citizens of Idaho that they have spelled out in this text that whether or not rules and regulations coming down from Health and Human Services will impinge upon these age-old rights that the citizens have had, that they would prefer that we have this text in there to protect those citizens. Therefore, I offer this amendment as a proposed amendment, and indeed do not want to get into the specifics of the amendment, but indeed address the issues before the body in assuring that these protections are in the present bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, good gentleman. So to the members of the body, there's language obviously being passed out, and and once the bill would potentially reside in general orders, then these and other amendments could be added in the process that we have if we would resolve ourselves into a committee of the whole House. The gentleman from District 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to debate against this bill and advise all of you to vote against or vote no on this motion. Mr. Speaker, we all know what happens in general orders. There's not much time to debate. Debate is very limited. You got 5 minutes to debate for, 5 minutes to debate against, a couple of minutes in closing, etc. That is a poor way to make public policy. General orders might be okay if, in fact, everybody has agreed on what the amendment is. This bill has been around for most of the session in one form or another. There have been multitudes and multitudes of forums and opportunities for people to do debate amendments. I don't know how many amendments have been proposed. The amendments that did make it are in the bill. And general orders is simply just a poor place, Mr. Speaker, to make public policy in bills like this, or any bill for that matter, where it's going to be very contentious. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would encourage the body to vote no on this motion. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from District 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak in favor of the amendment to this bill.
We're not speaking in favor of any amendments.
Debate.
We're debating on whether or not we should send the bill to general orders.
Okay, I rise to debate to have the bill sent to general orders.
You may rise and debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, good body. I read it 3 months ago. We all took an oath of office. That oath is found in Article 3, Section 25 of our Idaho State Constitution. Here's that oath. The members of the state legislature shall, before they enter upon the duties of their respective offices, take or subscribe the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Idaho, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of representative according to the best of my ability. Many people have forwarded me with the argument that our oath to uphold is to uphold the laws of the land. That's not the case. I would submit that the constitutions are the law of the land, period. And I thank God that our founders wrote them in simple, plain English that we can all easily read and understand. Let's take a look at those constitutions. Amendment 5 of the U.S. Constitution. No, nor shall any person...
State your point, good gentleman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe this goes beyond the debate of whether or not we want to send this legislation to general orders, so I object.
Duly noted, but we're going to give the gentleman from 3 some latitude to bring his debate back to the question.
Thank you, Mr.
Because
Speaker.
he's a skillful orator, and he can do that.
As a freshman, I'm still learning this process.
Well, you'll get to use that about one more time.
Okay, so is it appropriate for me to mention a couple points in the Constitution?
It is, but again, we're debating the motion to move to general orders, not the validity of the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, good body. The oath is to defend life, liberty, and property. The protection of life and property is the reason our constitutions exist in the first place. Life is listed first, obviously, because without life, the others fall by the wayside. I realize that the way the proponents of abortion have skirted the basic tenet of our Constitution by using a definition of when life begins is completely contrary to the definition that I use. The basis for this definition, I believe, is found in Isaiah chapter 44, verse 2, and it says, "Thus says the Lord who made you and formed you in the womb." It's noteworthy that our legislatures pass all kinds of laws to protect children, from bike helmet laws to car seat laws, and that the most dangerous place for a child in this country is inside the mother's womb.
Good gentleman.
I'm closing.
Let's keep it to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we are looking at a bill that could have contained language to protect the preborn, but does not. We have the opportunity to rectify that oversight. Please join me in voting to amend House Bill 248.
We are not voting to amend House Bill 248. We're voting to move House Bill 248 to the 12th order of business called general orders.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman from 13.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Debate in favor of the amendment.
Debate in favor of what?
Well, I would like to debate in favor of the amendment, but debate in favor
this is not the time nor the place.
I understand. Thank you, Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker.
has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It has been referenced already that we had a bill, and Mr. Speaker, could I ask to suspend the rule that refers to the bill that we passed last year with respect to abortion coverage?
If the bill passed and is in the code, the gentleman has the ability to reference the Idaho code.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and ladies of the body. This motion is not whether you agree with the state health insurance exchange or whether you want a federal health insurance exchange. The debate truly is whether you want to protect life and freedom of conscience. I carried the bill, Mr. Speaker, last year that stated that should we have a state health insurance exchange, we would exempt out abortions, but it is what is called a mechanical abortion. What we did not get in that legislation was abortifacients, Plan B and Ella. And I do have...
Mr. Speaker.
From 6.
Mr. Speaker, I object. There is no scientific evidence that Plan B or Ella are abortifacients. They are contraceptives.
Duly noted. And members of the body, you kind of see the rub here.
Certainly.
And certainly within general orders, we'll have the ability to make these cases on whether they are or aren't or should be or shouldn't be, etc. And so it's probably better that we lightly touch on potential amendments and not get into the details of what those amendments may or may not do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Because this is just one of many amendments that could be offered.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My apologies to the good gentleman from District 6. It was not my intent to go far afield.
The gentleman has the floor to
My
make the
intent
motion.
was to let the body know that we did not get contraceptive coverage known as Plan B or Ella in there. And so we would like to send it to the amending order to do that, to support the freedom of conscience and the right to life. So I'd ask for your support of this
Duly
amendment.
noted. Is there further debate on the motion to send House Bill 248 to general orders? Good lady from District 11.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I'd like to rise to debate against the motion. And I think there's a couple issues that we'd like to go ahead and cover. I want everyone to understand that by moving it to general orders absolutely affects your ability to vote on the same bill that you see today. General orders opens this bill up to any and all amendments, and it does not guarantee that the one you are looking at on your desk is the amendment or one of many amendments that may be brought forward. I'd also like you to know that by voting against the motion does not mean you are voting against adding this language into there. It does not mean, I guess what I want to say is that this is a very specific issue, and by voting against this amendment does not mean you are voting against this issue either, and I want to make that very clear. It only means that you do not want it to go to general orders because you want to vote on the bill as you see it. And I think that is the best route for us. Much of this has already been handled in committees. Most of these issues have already been talked about in hours worth of hearings. They've already been contemplated, and the specific issue that has been raised by this amendment that has been passed out is clearly defined in Idaho Code as is. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there further debate on the motion? Gentleman from 28.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen, to debate in favor of the motion. The language that I've received, I think, relates to the bill that we're considering, House Bill 248, and I know that is a concern of some of our constituents. The language in this amendment, and I think there are likely people who would have some comfort level in supporting the bill if they could have an opportunity to incorporate or not incorporate this language. And so I would hope that you would send this bill to general orders. Thank you.
Further debate? Good gentleman from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to debate against the motion to refer.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you. A motion to refer in this situation, I think, is inappropriate. We've been working on this for, almost 2 years. And in this legislature, certainly since before the start of the session, people were working on the exchange bill. We all knew this was one of the big issues that we were going to face, and there were numerous previous bills facing us, including trailer bills and proposed amendments. And the bill that's here now is a result of all of that work. It's a result of all of that work. And I don't believe that there is real value in derailing this, because that does appear to me to be what would happen, is that this bill would be derailed. I think we should take it on, make the decision that people elect us to do. And for that reason, I think we should continue debating this in the third reading.
The lady from District 28.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of clarification for freshmen and maybe the public, I don't know.
State your point.
As I understand it, having been through this process for the last few months, amendments to bills and statutes can be brought at any time. Is that correct? So if we debate and pass House Bill 248, is it not accurate that we can then come back and address this specific issue with this amendment later? Someone can carry a bill to have it added. Someone can carry a bill to amend an existing statute. Is that correct or not?
As good lady, if House Bill 248 is, I'll ask the question before the House, shall House Bill 248 pass? And then you'll vote on that, and then I will transmit that bill to the Senate. So our ability to amend that bill will have passed. Now, if we send it to general orders, then within your rule book, there's strict limits on debate. I believe 5 minutes in favor, 5 minutes against. Questions count against that time. Our questions do not count against that time, but and then there's an ability for the mover of the amendment to close. And so if we're going to amend a bill, a House bill, it would be done under our process and not after we pass the bill.
I guess my question, excuse me, and maybe I need to clarify better what I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, is that I have seen throughout this process over the last couple of months where many people have taken current code and statute and have brought suggested changes and suggested amendments and suggested improvements to those statutes. So us voting right now at this point in time to not necessarily take this specific issue up, along with the huge issue we're debating already, is something that could still be taken up. It's not a vote against the right to life.
I understand the lady's point now, and the point that I believe that she makes is there's certainly an ability to bring another bill that would further, amend the code, and that, certainly would be your prerogative. Good gentleman from District 14.
Mr. Speaker, I guess two things, maybe a point of personal privilege.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, the Speaker and I have been discussing on the phone, and I want to make it clear that this isn't a procedural vote. Nobody's locked down on this. And I would also like to debate the motion, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've sat here and listened to what's going on and thought about the process we've gone through in regards to this bill, I remember the first bill that came from the Senate. And there was a lot of heartache in this body, and there was a lot of discussion. And the Speaker did something that I thought was commendable. He slowed the process down. And he said, let's take a look at this. And he said, let's see if there's some things we can put in here to amend it to make it a better bill. And I commend you for that, Mr. Speaker. But in that process, I think something happened that I've never seen before. Those of you who had amendments that you wanted to present on this bill had to go through a process where you got, it's the quote you hear me say once in a while, the mother may I. You had to go to the governor's office and ask permission to create a new bill that addressed some of your concerns. And if the governor's office or the director of insurance or the governor's chief, this good gentleman on the second floor, I apologize, didn't appreciate the amendment you were trying to do, it wasn't included in the bill. And I'm reminded of the analogy that the good speaker uses often about the rocks. And you hear us talk about the rocks a lot of times here on the floor and in leadership meetings and even in caucus, where we have an idea and we take it to the other side or we take it to the person that has the bill, and they look at that rock and they say, that's a good rock, but it doesn't quite meet the diameter, or it doesn't quite work for what I want. Go find another rock and let's talk again. So we go scurrying off and we come back with another idea. And it's the same with this bill and the amendments that were proposed to make it better than what it was before. And I fully accept that it's better than it was before. I still don't like it. But the problem is still the same. There were a bunch of those rocks that got left out in the process as everybody went up and down to the second floor. So I encourage you to support the motion to send it to general orders. I think that we can make it a better bill. I appreciate the debate we're having today. I want you all to know that we are all going through the suffering that each one of you are going through, and I know that this could be a long day. And I hope that when this is all done today and we walk out those doors, that we all remember that we're all friends and colleagues, and that we're all here to try to do the same thing. That's what's best for the state of Idaho. And with that, Mr. Speaker, again, I encourage you to send this motion to approve this motion.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 15.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The good gentleman from 27 indicated that there have been a lot of amendments flying around. The good gentleman from 14 has indicated the process that has gone through. I would just like to note that there was a specific contraception life amendment that was submitted, and it was not in the bill, not put in the bill. So I think it's appropriate to take this up at this time. Thank you.
Is there further debate on the motion? Gentleman from 32.
Mr. Gentleman, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. You know, we all arrived here this morning at 9:30 and eager to do a job at hand. And this is a big pill to swallow, regardless which side of this issue we're on. But I don't think kicking the can down the road is going to help any. And I think we just as well stay today and decide the fate of the bill. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'd encourage your no vote to send that. I would support not sending this to general orders.
Further debate. Gentleman from 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak in favor of the motion, this bill, and I was there when we had some of the discussions, is particularly void of protecting right to life and freedom of conscience. And I think almost all of us, when we've been in this legislative process, have always considered those to be fundamental rights that we are trying to protect in the state. And I think that this bill is void of that. And I think, so I speak in favor of sending this to the amending order.
Further debate. Good lady from District 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is a question in order?
To whom?
The good gentleman from District 6 spoke a few moments ago, but I couldn't jump up fast enough, and so that's when I would have asked it. It's of the gentleman from District 6.
Will the gentleman from District 6 yield to a question from the good lady from District 6?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When you spoke a few moments ago, it was the first time that you had spoken, and after the initial introduction by the good gentleman from 27 about the Rule of 38 disclosure, I wondered if you had similar disclosures.
Mr. Speaker and good lady, Mr. Speaker and good lady, I do not. I have not been employed by a health plan for 8.5 years.
I'm going to interrupt right now. It's incumbent upon the members individually to disclose what conflicts they have or may not have under Rule 38, and probably inappropriate for the members to ask about those conflicts. I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you. And I appreciate, gentlemen and ladies in the body, that we've had the opportunity to participate in quite a few little sessions of teaching us about the topic and about the bill. And then recently there was a demo by a potential contractor for the software. So those have all been good things. I view this this motion and this bill, this topic, as being almost the most important vote that I will ever have in my life. There are a number of people in this chamber who were born after the President Johnson's Great Society and the Social Security Act that enabled Medicaid and Medicare, and it has impacted all of our lives all this time. And we're all here today, and I think it's important to be able to discuss this bill because the implications for generations to come are strong.
Good lady, I want to nudge you back to
I'm coming
debating
there.
the motion.
I'm coming.
Okay.
But it's our duty to establish a new entity with an exchange, and it's our duty also to see that it benefits all Idahoans in a positive way. We've got a lot of emotions. People have strong views, and I would like to take a moment. I'm sure that we have time to just mention two of my favorite people. Donald Rumsfeld often commented that there were laws that were in place that he was directed to enact, but that didn't mean that in the meantime we couldn't work to make some of those laws, if they were not the best, to work on them to make them better. And then the other person that I'm fond of quoting, because sometimes when we're in a situation like we're facing right now, we really need some words of encouragement, and that is, if you have ever heard of General Chesty Puller, he's had lots of pithy statements. One of the shortest, I'll give the short one, we're surrounded. That simplifies the problem. And that's kind of how I feel today. We have a big problem facing us, a big issue to talk about, and I support this motion. And I think we need to take it slowly and provide an opportunity to give input to the bill. We had opportunities, but they were not taken. And there are big topics that our constituents have that I think could benefit by being included in the bill. Nothing specific at this time. So I support the motion, and I urge you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Gentleman from 9.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say that I think that this motion is totally appropriate. Yes, in the amending order, you have to be careful. You have to watch what is brought. I've seen the time when people brought amendment to remove the enacting clause. You have to be on your feet and on your toes and watching what happens. But every one of those amendments, you will have the opportunity to vote on. So if you don't choose to put any other amendments on, there will be no other amendments added. And this amendment, I think, is very important. I think it covers three of our most basic constitutional rights: the right to religion, conscience, and life. And thank you. I urge you to vote yes in favor of sending this to the amending order.
Is there further debate? Hearing none, would the good gentleman from District 12.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Members of the House, I can't sit here and just do nothing. Again, I'm offended because of this amendment. I am a pro-life Republican, and I understand there's already a bill codified under Idaho Code 41-1848 that does not allow any state or federal exchange to accept abortion policy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House.
Further debate? Would the gentleman from District 2 care to close the debate on his motion to move House Bill 248 to general orders?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The lawyer in me is parsing the question differently than this good speaker is doing so. Looking at Masons, we see that in the third reading, a bill is open to amendment. My motion is to amend the bill. Naturally, the rule requires...
Gentleman from 6.
Mr. Speaker, is that a point of order?
State your point.
Mr. Speaker, I was under the impression that the motion was to move to general orders, not to amend the bill.
Are you talking past one another? Good gentleman from 2, your motion is to move House Bill 248 to general orders.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. I'm dividing the question.
House
if I may.
meetings.
confused. I love watching that group just wander off the floor. So he just decided they're going to have this discussion in the office.
Can I ask what your questions were and what prompted that?
Well, standard question.
Here, I guess the issue is
task
you have a history of questioning other people's conflicts.
Oh, well, he was on the original, one of the task forces, and he was on the committee that put the bill out to the floor, and there were a number of people who declared conflict of interest in that committee. So I mean, it was a fairly innocent question. I mean, the chairman, when he stood to announce the bill, only gave information about him. There are other people who declared conflict.
It's going. Well, that's all right. Yeah.
Oh, I've totally forgot to do that.
Oh, we will. Yeah, I will. We'll pause a moment for the members to return. House be in order? Prior to going at ease, the good gentleman from District 2 was closing his debate in favor of a motion to move House Bill 248 to general orders. The gentleman may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, many of us had an opportunity to participate in the content of this bill. I was not one of those. I think it's incumbent upon the body to assure the protections that our citizens require and ask for with respect to freedom of conscience, religious freedom, and certainly the protection of the preborn. For that reason, I ask that this bill be moved to general orders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The debate is closed. The question is, shall House Bill 248 be moved to general orders? The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will record their votes. Has every member voted? Representative Wood. Does any member wish to change his vote? The clerk will lock the machine and record the roll. The roll call shows 32 aye, 38 nay. The motion has failed. Is there further debate on House Bill 248? Good lady from District 11.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was wondering if the gentleman from 27 would yield to a question.
If the past is any indicator of the future, he will yield. But let's ask him.
Thank you.
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, good gentleman. So I had a question on page 5, line 36 of the bill. And this is regarding the agencies. And what it says is, the board and the exchange are entitled to rely upon work performed by the director and the director of the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare for furtherance of the purpose of this chapter. And so my question is, are there going to have to be additional employees hired to carry out the functions of what the requirements are? It said that they'll rely upon these agencies, or upon the directors, which I assume are the agencies as well.
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady. Excellent question. What line was that again? Just it's page 5, line
36. 36 through 39.
Okay. I posed that question to the Department of Insurance a couple of 3 days ago. They said that initially a few months ago that they thought that they may have, looking at it, they may require 4 additional employees. However, after looking at the fact that there will be no medical underwriting, the fact that an awful lot of the qualified health plans that are going to be put on the exchange, there's going to be significantly less variation in those health plans because of the essential health benefits that are going to be required, et cetera. That they feel that there's going to be significantly less work in some areas, which will allow them to transfer workload to other areas. And so at this point in time, they feel that they're not going to need any further employees at all, and are not going to request that, with a caveat that if in fact some kind of federal regulations come down that require the exchange to contract out with some contractor, which could possibly be the DOI, or some private contractor, then it would be up to the exchange actually to come up with the funding for that. But at this point in time, they do not anticipate any increase in employees at all.
May I have a follow-up?
Will the gentleman yield for?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, and good gentlemen. That is good to hear. My question, I brought this up the other day when we discussed the Department of Insurance appropriation as well. In the work plan, I counted up 31 different tasks that are attributed to the Department of Insurance. And I mean, that seems like a lot of work just to pass on. So are there extra employees in the Department of Insurance right now just waiting for something to be transferred over to them?
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady. There are a lot of functions that are going to be required, but you got to remember an awful lot of those functions are actually being currently done by the Department of Insurance, and it's anticipated that they will just be contracted to the department to continue their current operations. Thank you.
May I have an additional question on a different topic?
Would the gentleman yield to another question?
Yields.
Gentleman yields.
Great, thank you. And good gentlemen, I was looking in the blueprint under section 3.13, and this is talking about the information that will be provided on the web and that will be shared. And so what it talks about is that the electronic reporting results of eligibility and exemption assessments can be sent to HHS, IRS, and other agencies administering insurance affordability programs. And I was just wondering, because I'm sensitive to who this information is going to be shared with, who are those other agencies?
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know off the top of my head which agencies those are, but let's talk about the data for a minute, because I think this is a big boogeyman out there that a lot of people are concerned about, and rightfully so. However, with respect to the data that the exchange is supposed to collect, if you pay federal or state income taxes, if you participate in Medicare, either pay into it or receive Medicare benefits, or if you pay into Social Security benefits or receive Social Security benefits or other programs like that from the federal government, they already have all of the information that the exchange is going to collect, except for the information that you actually purchased a qualified health plan. So with respect to information such as taxpayer identification number, which for individuals, et cetera, is all Social Security numbers, they already have all of that. As a matter of fact, if you go to the exchange and you decide that you just kind of want to query whether or not you are eligible for either a premium tax credit or cost sharing reduction or whatever, and you ask for an eligibility determination and then decide that you don't want to purchase, the way that they verify your information is to actually query through the Federal Service Data Hub all of the information from Social Security, the IRS, et cetera. So the fact is they already have all of the information, so they're not going to find out anything new from the exchange. Thank you.
Is there further debate? The lady from District 33.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman from 27 please yield to a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentleman yields.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you. And in regards to the question that was just asked, I do have a question. Within the law itself, in Section 1413, it states agreements subject to Section 1411 and Section 3103, the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, and any other requirement providing safeguards of privacy and data integrity. The Secretary may establish model agreements and enter into agreements for the sharing of data under this section. If they already have the data, why do we have to put into code that she can enter into agreements and share our data?
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good ladies and gentlemen, good lady from 33. I think what is meant by that is that the data sharing would go both ways. Okay? So that the memorandum of understanding would say that whatever data the exchange collects can be shared with the federal government, and the federal government can also share data from internal revenue sources, et cetera. That's what the Federal Service Data Hub is, as I understand it. Now, again, you know, I've not seen any memorandum of understanding or anything like that. But the issue is that back to the original question of what data is collected by the exchange, the federal government already has all of that data, with the exception of what product is purchased through the exchange. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 15.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The good gentleman from 27 yield to a couple questions.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. The grant funding that is supposed to come to help set up the exchange, I believe Idaho's been allotted about $20 million, but as I understand it, that's a drawdown grant, so you have to show certain benchmark in your progress before you get the money. Can you tell us how this particular nonprofit exchange organization is going to get money initially to operate?
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, good gentleman from 15. As I understand it, once the state-based exchange is established, a governing board is appointed. One of their first duties, obviously, is to develop a plan of operation, and from that plan of operation then start awarding contracts, et cetera, for vendors, not only IT vendors, but others. And from that, then by contract, either those vendors or the exchange would be able to draw down against the federal spending authority, is what it turns out to be, which is the way that almost all federal programs work. They typically don't send money down the pipeline. They send spending authorities so that once the work is done, you can draw down against that work. But my understanding is that would be the process that would happen. And most likely, I think, as I heard it described once, that the actual vendors that had the contract that would be doing the work would be able to draw down.
Follow-up, Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker.
from 15. Will the gentleman yield further?
Gentleman yields.
The gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. So if I understand what you're saying, we're basically starting dry, and so they'll start doing this work and putting out contracts. But until those contracts and all of the particulars are approved by HHS, we're kind of waiting for the money. Is that
gentleman from 27.
Well, good gentleman, I think that's the way all of the programs work. I can tell you that probably the one I'm the most familiar with is Fish and Game, but when federal monies come down for Fish and Game, the work has to be completed and certified, et cetera, and then the federal government is billed, and then the federal government pays. So I don't know that this is going to be any different. I would expect it to be exactly the same. I don't think they're going to pay money up front. The work will have to be completed and certified as I understand the process.
And follow up, Mr. Speaker.
Would the gentleman yield further?
Gentleman yields.
The gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. Assuming that the costs of setting up the exchange exceed the $20 million, where's that going to come from?
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. Quarterly, the states are allowed to apply for funding grants. The last grant that can be applied for is in October of 2014, and the last grants are awarded, I believe, in December of 2014. And until that time, the state, on a quarterly basis, can apply for further grants.
Follow up, Mr. Speaker.
Will the gentleman yield to another question?
Gentleman yields.
The gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, good gentleman, I don't think that answered my question. My question was, if the cost of the exchange exceed the allotted $20 million, where's that extra money going to come from?
Gentleman from 27.
Federal government.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman.
Follow up.
Would the gentleman yield farther?
Gentleman yields.
Again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. I don't understand the response of federal government because they've set an allotment of $20 million. It's my understanding after that we're on our own. So I guess my question is still out there about where the extra money would come from.
So it's more of a rhetorical question then?
Mr. Speaker, I don't think so.
Gentleman from 27.
Well, I guess maybe I'm not understanding then. If $20 million is not enough, then additional grants will be asked for and presumably awarded, and the money will come from the same place that the previous $20 million came from.
Gentleman
I
from
guess
15.
if that's not the right answer, then I'm just simply failing to understand the concept of the question here, I guess.
Well, Mr. Speaker, follow up.
The gentleman may, but let's drill down here.
Well, that's what I'm trying
Will
to
the
do.
gentleman
Mr.
yield
Speaker.
to another question?
Mr.
Gentleman
Speaker,
yields.
good gentleman.
Gentleman yields.
So what assurance do we have that we'll get more money or grant money, and how much is available for us to get beyond the $20 million?
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman, I'm aware of any limit. I'm unaware of any limit, and I presume that the grant request could be turned down. I guess that's always an option, but I think that the state of Idaho is showing good progress and showing that we're actually using the first $20 million in an appropriate manner. I don't think that there would be an issue with receiving further grants.
Gentleman from 15.
Speaker, may I inquire in a different area, if the good gentleman would yield?
Will the gentleman yields? The gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman. We're a little shy of 7 months out from when the exchange is supposed to start taking applications on October the 1st. Other than submitting the blueprint to the federal government, can you tell us what other steps have taken, what's actually in place now within the state of Idaho to make that exchange work in a little less than 7 months from now?
Gentleman from 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good gentleman from 15. As I understand it, there are a couple of three ways that the state of Idaho can approach this and still make the deadline. The first of all is the state of Mississippi essentially had an exchange complete and then abruptly stopped that function. And the vendor who was doing the state of Mississippi has offered their product, which is apparently very similar to what Idaho would need and want, and feels that that could be up and running and be certified in time to start enrollment. Secondly, the Levitt Group is also working on an exchange-in-a-box concept. Basically what that is off-of-the-shelf software and hardware that can be bought and dropped in, and the state would be up and functioning enough to meet the qualifications with HHS. I'm not sure whether other options are available, but in talking to the Department of Insurance, I think that there are options that are available like that. I think lastly that HHS has shown to those states that are wishing to do a state exchange that they will be as flexible as they possibly can be with respect to getting the exchange up and running and those timelines to do that.
Is there further debate? Gentleman from 34.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've had some real good debate on this bill today. And I think the good gentleman from 27 brought up some good points when he first started about turning over an Idaho program to the federal government. That's why I'm debating in favor of this bill today. When he talked about the wolves, I think that was a good example. Ever since we denied management of those wolves, we have tried to get it back. We've tried to amend it. We've tried to do everything. You don't do that with the federal government. Once you acquiesced to their demands, then look how many years it's taken us to get management of the wolves back. I've been chairman of the Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee since 2004. And I've had the opportunity to work with our DEQ in all of that time. And we have had many problems with the DEQ administering particular laws and things that we don't like. Well, nobody in this body dislikes the Affordable Health Care Act more than I do. But I've known from working with DEQ that I would rather work with our local state people than I would to have to go to Seattle and ask them for some kind of a decision on
whether or not I could run this ditch full of water into the river, or whether or how it needed to be taken care of. You just don't do that. It takes years, not a month or two. It takes years to get any kind of a decision from them, let alone direction. I've been through that. I know that. We need to do this on a state exchange where we as a legislature have the ability and use our own foresight that if we need to, that we can amend this legislation in the next session. If we can see things are not working just like we'd like them to, we amend statutes all the time. And that's what we're doing today. We're making a statute. The statute then creates the exchange. If we need to, next year we come back and we make some improvements to that statute. But I, for one, am not willing, if I can possibly help it, to turn this size of an enterprise that's going to affect every single person in this state over to a federal agency that if I have a problem with them, I can't get it straightened out for a year or two. I want to be able to come to this state. I want to be able to come to this exchange that is here, locally, that is beholden to this legislature for their furtherment and their taking care of things. I want to be able to deal with them, not some bureaucrat from Washington, D.C., or like the EPA in Seattle to try and get something done. We've seen in a DEQ, especially I know over in our area we've had stations that have had problems with their underground storage tanks. They can come to the DEQ and say, how can we fix this? How can we take care of this? And the DEQ will come and help them and get it solved. You think the federal government's going to help anybody solve a problem with their underground storage tank? No, they're going to shut it off. Take it out. That's how they act. That's the reaction we get from them. So stop and think when you vote today on this bill. Do you want the federal government to tell you what you can do and what you can't do with no recourse? Or do you as members of this body want a state organization that if it needs changing, we can come back and adjust this statute to help our people? I think that's what we're here for, is to help our people of our state. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Gentleman from 14.
Mr. Speaker, I was going to sit on my hands in the last few days to debate the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
The last few days have kind of been a little tough in my life, and I sit there at night sometimes and I try to think of whether or not I should say anything on this bill. And the good gentleman who just talked to us from District 34 is a good friend of mine, and I love him to death. But he touched on a spot that's really gripes me a little bit. And so I apologize for my thoughts being all over the place as I talk here for a few minutes. But sometimes at night when you write things down and you're really tired, they look like Dan Popke's writing. And I don't know if any of you looked at that. You can't read it. And so I'm in the same boat as I stand here.
Gentleman probably should refrain from referencing members of the press.
You're probably right, Mr. Speaker, but he's standing there and he's an open target.
His writing is poor.
But the good gentleman, and hopefully he can't read it. The good gentleman brings up DEQ. And, he brings up some good points. But how many times in this body have we gone back and told DEQ to quit going out farther than what the federal government requires them to? All the time we're dealing with it because they go farther than what they're supposed to. The director of DEQ this year, when he met with the local legislators, talked about primacy and how not necessarily the best thing in the world because all he does is whatever the EPA tells him he has to do. He's a sock puppet. They tell him and he does it. Now, it was mentioned that this is a state exchange. How many of you in here believe this is a state exchange? We don't get a look at the rules. We don't get to set what they charge. You will have no say in what they do. You're given a body corporate politic outside of the realms of this building the ability to raise revenue, taxes, fees with no oversight from you. You don't get to look at the rules. Oh, you'll have 3 members of this body on a 19-member committee, I think it is. How in the heck is that state control? I heard, well, we can just come back and change this bill. Not necessarily. You can come back and try, but the governor supports it. So you've got to have 47 votes on the House and the Senate to do any changes. And remember, these are unelected folks you're giving all this power to. I have a lot of concern. I had hoped that we could amend the bill and fix the life issue, the tax issue, where we could at least cap it. Put a sunset on it so it has to come back where we have to look at it. Take control. If you're going to have a state exchange, have the state involved, for crying out loud. You know, you're going to hear in the debate today, too, and you've heard it earlier, that, hey, the state can just stop at any time. Well, you know, I spent a little money to print some of the bills so you guys could look at what the Obamacare Act really did. There's nowhere in there that says that you can undo this once you start it. It does mention 13 and a half months warning, but if you look at the agreement that the governor signed in December with HHS, on the second page it refers to 1311. How many of you know what is involved with Obamacare Act on Section 1311? Do you know what you gave away as a state when you signed up to that? Do you? It also talks about some of the many thousands of pages of regulations that are being written. One of them is 155, and that actually talks about whether or not the state can get out or even change the act. We can make a request to change what we put in this plan. How many of you have read the 100-page plan? We can change that, but we have to ask their permission. There's the word again, mother may I. Mother may I change, mother may I have a redo, and they've got up to 90 days to decide whether they're going to let you do it. And then they can just tell you no. What are you going to do about it? Change the law? You can't. You sold off on the deal when you signed up and you passed this bill and you sign up with the governor's agreement that's 100 pages long. You don't have an option then. You know, I could go on and on about the problems with this bill. We heard wolves earlier. Let's talk about the wolves. When the wolves came to Idaho, somebody in this state had to sign something with the federal government to allow them to put the wolves here. Somebody had to sign it. You know who it was? Do a little work. Find out who it was. Now, the Obamacare Act is specific. It says that the governor has to sign it. And the good gentleman on the second floor sent that letter. But he sent that letter with one caveat. That 100-page agreement has one caveat. And that was his way out. And that caveat was that the legislature has to also agree. You have to agree. If you do not agree, we get a redo. We can start over. We can come up with something that probably works better than what you're doing today. If you pass this, you don't have another shot at the pie, guys. You get one shot at this. And by the way, you have a whole year to decide this. Did you know that? You could put it off a year. Maybe within a year you'll know what some of those regulations that the federal government is going to shove down your throat really are. Why won't we find out what they are before we sign up? We can drink the Kool-Aid in a year. Maybe it'll be better by then. I struggle. You know, you create what I think the word is God squad. You create this group of individuals that aren't elected. They're not elected and they can tax you. And they set regulations and they set fees and they tell you what you can and can't do. And their oversight is the federal government, the same group you're all afraid of. They're still going to tell them what to do. They are still a sock puppet for the federal government. You know, years ago, maybe I better slow down here a bit. Years ago, I used to work for a outfitter as a hunting guide. Back then, I had a little more hair on my head, and you know, I used to think I was bulletproof. You know, I used to think I could run an elk down. Never could do it, but I came close once. And I worked on a ranch called the Willie Ranch, and the Willie Ranch was homesteaded, I believe, by the second governor of Idaho's brother, and it's in the South Fork of the Salmon Country. And I don't know if you've ever been there. It's really steep country. And that's where the sheep-eater Indians were at. There's an awesome book about the sheep-eater Indian wars and how the cavalry went in to get them, and they came out with no horses. They went in with a bunch, but they came out with none. They didn't catch any Indians either, by the way. But that country is awesome country, and I used to have the opportunity to travel with horses and mule pack strings on some of their old trails. And there was one trail in particular that we used to use to get up into these high mountain meadows, and it was an awesome place. Very few people have ever been there. Used to love to go there. And when we would go there, you had to go down through a place, and then you got into the middle of a creek. It was called Sheep Creek, actually. And you went a little ways, and then the trail went up the side of a mountain. And it was steep, really, really steep. And on each side were these big granite walls. And the Indians had figured out how to get up through that to get onto the top. And when you went up there, it was just switchback after switchback, and they were really, really tight. And I always remember when we'd get there, the first thing I'd do is take my feet out of the stirrups, and I'd lock into those buck and rolls with my knees because it scares me even sitting here thinking about it. It was not a comfortable trip up that mountain. And as you would go, the trees were just like, the tops were here because it was so steep. And you went back and back and back and back and back and back and back. And when you got to the very top, there was a big granite rock. And you went under that big granite rock to an open hillside, and that was where safety was. When you got there, it was a relief. Well, on this particular day, it was late in the fall. And the outfitter went first with the hunters. And then the other